Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into what should have been a perfect autumn afternoon in a park so pristine, you'd think it was pulled straight from a postcard. We're talking manicured lawns, children's laughter echoing from the playground, and the crisp, clean scent of fallen leaves. But beneath that flawless surface, the soil holds a secret, one that an officer and his four-legged partner are about to unearth, turning this peaceful haven into the heart of a chilling mystery. The kind of story that makes you look twice at the quietest places in your own town. I'll be honest, you probably shouldn't be listening to this alone. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support is what keeps these stories coming. Once you've done that, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where in the world this darkness is seeping out. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The afternoon sun hangs low and golden over Northgate Park, casting long shadows that stretch like grasping fingers across the grass. It's a Tuesday, unremarkable in every way. Officer Dave Miller watches his partner, a sable German shepherd named Zeus, bound ahead. To anyone watching, they're just a cop and his dog enjoying the last vestiges of good weather. But Zeus isn't just any dog. He's a multi-certified human remains detection canine, or an HRD. His job isn't to find drugs or bombs, it's to find the lost, the forgotten, the buried. Today is supposed to be a low-stress training day. Miller has pre-planted a training aid, a small vial containing pseudoscent, a chemical cocktail that mimics the specific volatile organic compounds of decomposition, in a far corner of the park. The goal is simple: keep Zeus's skills sharp, reinforce the scent to reward connection, and enjoy the air. Miller lets the long lead slip through his gloved hands, giving Zeus the freedom to work. The dog's tail wags lazily, his nose twitching, sampling the buffet of smells the park has to offer. Squirrels, discarded hot dog buns, and the faint perfume of a passing jogger. Standard stuff. They approach the newly established Founders Garden, a small, immaculate plot of land funded by a local tech millionaire. It's the park's crown jewel, filled with prize-winning roses and ornamental shrubs, all surrounded by a low wrought iron fence. It's an unusual spot for training, too pristine, too public. But Miller figures the complex floral scents provide a good challenge for Zeus to work through. He watches as Zeus trots along the manicured paver path, his ears perked. Then, the dog's entire demeanor changes. It's a shift they see 100 times, yet it never fails to send the cold spike up its spine. The happy-go-lucky tail stops wagging and stiffens, straight as a poker. The dog's gait changes from a loose trot to a low stalking crawl. His head drops, his nose hovering an inch above a bed of freshly laid mulch surrounding a vibrant, deep red rosebush. This isn't the playful, I found it signal Zeus gives for a training aid. This is different. This is the real thing. Zeus circles the rosebush once, twice, his focus absolute. He ignores Miller's soft commands to continue. He then sits, ramrod straight, and locks eyes with his handler. This is his final, passive alert. It's a silent, profound declaration. It's here. Miller feels a familiar knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He tugs gently on the lead. Okay, buddy, leave it. Find the toy. But Zeus doesn't move. He just stares, his gaze unwavering. He knows he can't ignore this. A certified K9's alert is considered probable cause. While defense attorneys often argue in court that a handler can subconsciously cue their dog, creating a false positive, a very real and debated phenomenon known as the clever hands effect, Miller knows his dog. He knows this signal. There's no ambiguity here. This isn't a cue, it's a discovery. He kneels, his eyes scanning the area. It looks perfect. The mulch is evenly distributed, the soil around the base of the rosebush undisturbed. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing out of place. It's a picture of suburban serenity. That in itself is the first major red flag. A burial, even a shallow one, is messy. It leaves a trace. Yet, there is none. Maybe it's just a dead animal, a raccoon or a stray cat that someone gave a makeshift burial. It happens all the time. But Zeus is trained to differentiate. He's specifically calibrated to ignore animal remains. With a sigh, Miller pulls out a small trowel from his training bag. He has to check. If it's nothing, he'll smooth the mulch back over and no one will be the wiser. He pushes the trowel into the soft, dark earth next to the rosebush. It sinks in easily, too easily. The soil is loose, freshly turned. Another red flag. He digs carefully, scooping out handfuls of rich, damp soil. A few inches down, the trowel clinks against something that isn't a rock. He scrapes the dirt away. It's not a bone. It's not what he expected at all. It's a piece of dark, scuffed material. He works his fingers around the edges, pulling it free. He holds it up to the light. It's a small, rectangular piece of high-quality leather, maybe 4 inches by 6, with a small silver zipper pull attached to one edge. It looks like it was torn from a very expensive piece of luggage. It's an incredibly odd detail. Who buries a piece of a suitcase in a public rose garden? Miller stands up, the piece of leather in his palm. The weight of the situation settles on him. This isn't an animal. This isn't a prank. He looks at Zeus, who is still sitting patiently waiting for his reward. The dog found what he was supposed to find. He gives him the praise he deserves, rubbing his ears and murmuring, "Good boy, Zeus, good boy." But his eyes are locked on the rosebush. He pulls out his radio, his voice steady as the adrenaline surging through him. "Dispatch, this is Unit 2 K9. I'm at Northgate Park. I have a possible 187 scene. A homicide." The dispatcher's calm, professional voice crackles back, but Miller barely hears it. The peaceful, perfect park doesn't feel so perfect anymore. It feels like a tomb.
The blue and red lights arrive without sirens, a silent, strobing invasion of the park's tranquility. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and the crime scene is now an island of harsh, artificial light in a sea of encroaching darkness. Detective Mark Kinsley steps under the tape, his face a mask of weary professionalism. He's seen 100 scenes like this, but the setting, this ridiculously perfect garden, adds a layer of surrealism that makes his teeth ache. He nods at Miller, who's standing off to the side with Zeus, both of them now just spectators to the machine they've set in motion. Kinsley crouches by the rosebush, careful not to disturb anything inside the newly established perimeter. His gaze sweeps over the scene. He sees the small pile of dirt from Miller's trowel and the piece of leather, now bagged and tagged as evidence item number 1. He looks at the loose mulch, the immaculate flowers. "Whoever did this," he says to his partner, a younger, sharper-dressed detective named Chen, "was either very stupid or very, very arrogant. Burying a body in a public park is bold. Burying it in the brand new, high-profile centerpiece of that park is a middle finger to the world." The forensics team works with the quiet efficiency of librarians, their movements precise and economical. They use small brushes and dental picks, peeling back the layers of soil and mulch like archaeologists on a dig. It's slow, painstaking work. Hours crawl by. They don't find a body, not in the way you'd imagine. What they find is far more difficult. Fragmented skeletal remains. Not enough to constitute a full person, but more than enough to confirm Zeus's alert. The pieces are scattered in a way that suggests dismemberment, but the lack of any significant blood evidence in the surrounding soil is baffling. It's as if the parts were cleaned before they were buried. And as they sift, they find other items. A tarnished silver cufflink, plain and unadorned. A set of car keys for a high-end German sedan, but the integrated fog is smashed. Its electronics fried. And then they find the strangest clue of all. Tucked near a fragment of a tibia is a sock. Just one. It's made of a dark merino wool, impossibly soft, but the odd detail is the pattern. A series of tiny, embroidered hummingbirds, each stitched with an almost microscopic precision. It's a bizarrely whimsical item to find in a shallow grave. It's custom, expensive, and utterly out of place. Now, the real work begins, putting a name to the nameless. They have no face, no fingerprints. The partial remains are sent to the medical examiner, who confirms the victim was an adult male, likely in his late 40s or early 50s. The smashed car key fob offers nothing. It's chip destroyed. The cufflink is generic. The only real hope is DNA and dental records. They extract a viable DNA sample and run it through CODIS, the national database, but get no hits. This person has no criminal record. they begin the laborious process of trying to match the few recovered teeth against the dental records in NAM-US, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. It's a digital shot in the dark, comparing their fragments against thousands of missing persons files from across the country. Days turn into a week. Nothing. This is where the case could easily stall out, entering the purgatory of cold cases. Prosecutors get nervous in situations like this. It brings up the ongoing legal debate surrounding no-body murder prosecutions. While they have parts of a body, a skilled defense attorney can create reasonable doubt. They can argue that without a full corpse, you can't definitively prove the person is dead. Maybe they're just missing a limb. It's a ghoulish, but sometimes effective strategy. The prosecution needs an identity. They need to prove not just that a crime occurred, but that a specific person's life was taken. The break comes from that single ridiculous sock. Detective Chen, a bulldog when it comes to tedious research, refuses to let it go. He spends days calling high-end department stores, then specialty menswear shops, and finally, bespoke tailors. Most of them laugh him off. But one, an old-world craftsman in a neighboring affluent town, recognizes the description. He asks Chen to email him a photo. An hour later, he calls back, his voice hushed. "Yes," he says, "I made that sock. It was part of a set of 12, each with a different embroidered bird, a special commission. He only made one set like it. It was for a very particular, very private client, a man named Julian Croft." Suddenly, the ghost has a name. Julian Croft. A quick search reveals he's a 52-year-old financial analyst. He has no family in the state, no social media presence, and lives in a sterile, high-security condo building. His neighbors describe him as a wraith, a man they rarely saw, who kept to himself. In fact, no one had. A missing person report was never filed. With the name, the pieces start to click into place. The partial dental records are a match. The smashed car key belongs to the pristine Audi currently sitting in Croft's designated spot in his building's garage. Inside the car, tucked under the passenger seat, they find the other Hummingbird sock, stuffed inside a shoe. The first ironic twist. The very thing that helped identify him was separated from him in his final moments. But the second twist is the one that makes Detective Kinsley's blood run cold. As they trace Croft's financials, they find his client list. He managed portfolios for some of the city's wealthiest residents. And sitting right at the top of that list is a name Kinsley recognizes instantly. Alistair Finch, the tech mogul, the philanthropist, the man who funded and dedicated the Founder's Garden, the very same garden where Julian Croft's remains were just carefully, painstakingly exhumed. The man wasn't just buried in a random park. He was buried in a monument built by one of his own clients. The crime scene isn't just a burial site, it's a message.
Alistair Finch lives in a house that looks less like a home and more like a modern art museum that someone forgot to put the art in. It's all glass and steel and sharp angles, perched on a hill overlooking the city. When detectives Kinsley and Chen pull into the sweeping driveway, Finch is waiting for them on the steps, flanked by a lawyer who looks like he was assembled from a kit labeled expensive attorney. Finch himself is the picture of calm, composed charisma. He's dressed in a casual but clearly costly gray sweater and dark jeans. His smile is warm, his handshake firm. He looks more like a daytime talk show host than a potential person of interest in a murder investigation. He ushers them into a cavernous living room with a 20-foot ceiling and a single, stark white couch. He's already been briefed by his lawyer. He knows why they're here. "Julian Croft," Finch says, shaking his head with a practiced solemnity. "I heard the news. It's just dreadful. Absolutely shocking." He speaks of Croft with a detached fondness, describing him as a brilliant but socially awkward numbers guy. "He made me a great deal of money," Finch admits with a shrug. "But a friend? No, I wouldn't say we were friends. It was a purely professional relationship." Kinsley watches him, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment too long. "Mr. Finch," Kinsley begins, his tone level, "your relationship with Mr. Croft wasn't just professional. Our records show you two were co-investors in a rather significant land development project, a joint venture. Looks like you were business partners." The smile on Finch's face tightens almost imperceptibly at the edges. The lawyer shifts his weight. A minor side project, Finch corrects smoothly. Julian handled the financial modeling. I provided the capital. It was struggling. Struggling is one word for it, Chen chimes in, looking at his notepad. Our forensic accountants are calling it a catastrophic failure. Looks like the project was leveraged to the hilt and about to go under, taking about $20 million of your money with it. And it seems Mr. Croft was the one who structured the deal. This is the first crack in Finch's polished veneer. A flicker of something cold and hard flashes in his eyes before he papers it over with a sigh of frustration. Julian could be overzealous. He was convinced he could turn it around. I was preparing to cut my losses. He leans forward, his expression earnest. Detectives, I lose $20 million on a bad investment? It's a Tuesday. It's irritating, but it's certainly not a motive for what you're suggesting. It's a plausible defense. For a man of Finch's immense wealth, $20 million might as well be pocket change. But the motive might not be the money itself. It could be the embarrassment, the blow to his reputation as a flawless investor. They press him for his hour bearings on the estimated date of Julian Croft's disappearance, a window of about 72 hours, 3 weeks prior. His alibi is, predictably, perfect. He was at a tech conference in another state. He flew out on a private jet on a Monday morning and returned late Wednesday night. He has flight manifests, hotel receipts, credit card statements, and dozens of witnesses who can place him at the conference. It's an alibi wrapped in Kevlar. But there's a loose thread, a tiny one. Kinsley asks for the name of the airport he flew out of. Finch provides it without hesitation. A small private airfield outside the city, the kind that caters exclusively to the private jet crowd. Checkmate. Or so Kinsley thinks. But the alibi holds. The airfield's logs confirm Finch's jet departed at 8 a.m. sharp on Monday and returned at 11:30 p.m. on Wednesday. Watertight. They leave the glass house with nothing but a bad feeling. Finch is too smooth, his story too clean. That night, Chen sits in his cubicle, bleary-eyed, going through the case file for the 10th time. The cufflink, the smashed key fob, the weird sock, the piece of luggage. It all feels disconnected. He pulls up the report on Julian Croft's car again. He reads through the list of items inventoried from the vehicle. Standard stuff. Owner's manual, insurance card, tire pressure gauge, an old coffee stain on the carpet. And then he sees it. An item so trivial it was barely noted. Under the driver's seat, forensics had found a single disposable plastic lighter. A cheap, bright orange Bic. It's a detail so small it's almost meaningless. Julian Croft was a militant non-smoker. His condo was free of any smoking paraphernalia. Why would he have a lighter in his car? On a hunch, Chen pulls the digital records for Croft's building. He's not looking at the security cameras. He's looking at the keycard access logs for the resident garage. He cross-references the log with the date of Julian Croft's disappearance. Croft's keycard was last used to enter the garage 2 days before Finch's flight. But an hour after Finch's jet supposedly took off for the conference, there's an entry. A maintenance override code was used to open the garage main gate. This is a real legal event that often cracks cases, the abuse of master keys or override codes by someone who shouldn't have them. This entry sticks out. It's an anomaly. Experts in digital forensics still argue over the admissibility of certain types of metadata in court, questioning its reliability and susceptibility to tampering. But a direct entry in a security server log, that's hard to dispute. Chen digs deeper. Who has access to that override code? A very short list. The building manager, 2 security guards, and the third-party company that services the electronic gates. And with a little more digging, he discovers the owner of that third-party company, Alistair Finch. It was one of his very first tech ventures, a small security firm he still owned. This is the second ironic twist. Finch had the keys to the kingdom, not just to his own life, but to Croft's as well. Chen feels a jolt of electricity. Finch didn't need to be there in person. He could have sent someone. Or he could have lied about his departure. What if the flight manifest was a smokescreen? He calls the private airfield again. He doesn't ask for the logs this time. He asks to speak to the line crew supervisor who was on duty that Monday morning. He asks him a very specific question. Do you remember prepping Mr. Finch's jet that day? Do you remember seeing him get on it?
There's a long pause on the other end of the line. "Yeah, I remember the plane," he says slowly. "We got it fueled and ready, but I never saw Mr. Finch. The pilot just said the boss had a last-minute change of plans and wouldn't be making the trip. The plane left empty." The Kevlar alibi has just completely disintegrated. The final damning twist, Finch wasn't on the plane. He had his pilots fly an empty jet to another state and back, creating a perfect digital ghost of his movements while he was still in the city. He had the means, the motive, and now the opportunity. That cheap plastic lighter found in the non-smoker's car suddenly takes on a sinister new meaning. Maybe it wasn't for lighting cigarettes. Maybe it was for destroying something else. Something like a key fob's electronic chip. With Alistair Finch's alibi shattered, the case seems to be barreling towards a swift conclusion. Kinsley and Chen feel the familiar hum of a case coming together. They have a primary suspect with a clear motive, not just the $20 million, but the preservation of his own myth as an infallible businessman. They have opportunity. He faked his trip. And they have a connection to the victim that goes beyond a simple client relationship. It feels solid. They bring Finch in for a second interview, this time in a small gray room at the station. The charismatic veneer is gone. Finch sits across the table from them, his lawyer by his side. His expression now a mixture of indignation and carefully controlled fury. When they lay it all out, the empty jet, the maintenance override code for Croft's garage, the failing joint venture, he doesn't flinch. He simply listens, his jaw tight. "This is absurd," he says, his voice low and even. "Yes, I own the company that services the gate, a relic from my early days. I haven't been involved in its operations in 20 years. And yes, my plans changed. I was supposed to go to the conference, but a personal matter required me to stay. I sent the plane ahead for my return journey. It's a matter of efficiency." His explanation is slick, plausible. He's admitting to the facts, but twisting their meaning. "What personal matter?" Kinsley presses. His lawyer cuts in. "My client is not obligated to discuss his private life with you." The stone wall is up. They have no confession, and Finch's story, while convenient, is difficult to disprove without more concrete evidence linking him directly to the disposal of the body. They have a powerful circumstantial case, but they know it might not be enough to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. The pressure is on the forensics. The report from the soil and trace evidence team comes in, and it's a bombshell. But it's not the one they were expecting. The lead forensic geologist, a woman with a near-psychic ability to read dirt, lays out her findings. The soil from the burial site in the founder's garden contains the expected elements: local loam, sand, and the specific peat mixture used in the commercial mulch. But a microscopic analysis of the dirt found clinging to the victim's bone fragments and the piece of leather luggage tells a completely different story. That dirt contains high concentrations of red clay, granite particulate, and most importantly, trace amounts of diatomaceous earth. This is the first bewildering twist. Diatomaceous earth is a specific type of sedimentary rock formed from fossilized algae. It's used in everything from swimming pool filters to dynamite, but it's not naturally occurring anywhere in the county, let alone in the pristine soil of Northgate Park. Furthermore, the specific mineral composition of the red clay and granite is unique to a single geographic area, a sparsely populated region of the state over 200 miles away, known for its old and abandoned quarries. The implication is staggering. Julian Croft wasn't killed and buried in the park. He was killed and buried somewhere else, somewhere with red clay and granite quarries. He was then exhumed, dismembered, and reburied in the founder's garden. This completely upends their timeline. The initial burial must have happened weeks, maybe even months before the reburial in the park. This is a real forensic technique that has redirected many investigations, analyzing pollen and soil to trace a body's geographic journey. It creates a secondary crime scene, a primary burial site that they now have to find. Suddenly, Alistair Finch's faked alibi for that 72-hour window becomes less significant. The murder itself could have happened long before that. The reburial in his founder's garden could still be a message, a taunt, but it doesn't mean he was the original killer.
This leads to an intense debate within the investigative team, an example of the kind of unresolved theories that can splinter a case. One camp believes Finch is still the guy. He killed Croft months ago, got spooked, and moved the body to a place he controlled. The other camp, led by Kinsley, starts to think they're looking at two different culprits, a killer and a gardener. Maybe someone else killed Croft and then moved the body to the park specifically to frame Finch. The soil report forces them to re-examine everything. The oddest detail in the file, that piece of expensive-looking leather is sent back to the lab for more intensive analysis. They had assumed it was from a suitcase, but they were wrong. The lab runs a deep chemical analysis on the material. They find trace residues of waxes, oils, and strangely, lanolin. The texture and wear patterns aren't consistent with luggage. It's thicker, more rigid. After consulting with a specialist, they identify it. It's not from a suitcase. It's a fragment from a custom-made professional-grade equestrian saddle. The second, crucial twist. Julian Croft, the quiet, reclusive financial analyst, was apparently involved in the world of horseback riding. This new information is a key that unlocks a door they didn't even know existed. They assumed Croft was a loner, a man with no life outside his condo and his computer. Now they have a hobby, a potential social circle. Chen starts digging again, this time searching for equestrian clubs, stables, and riding associations, cross-referencing them with Croft's name and financials. He finds it almost immediately. For the past 5 years, Julian Croft had been making regular, substantial payments to a place called Blackwood Creek Stables. It's a remote, high-end facility located right in the heart of that red clay quarry region, 200 miles away. The timeline snaps into a chilling new focus. Finch's faked alibi now looks like a red herring. The real crime scene wasn't in the city at all. It was out in the country, in a place no one had ever thought to look. The entire investigation has been pointing in the wrong direction. They haven't just been one step behind, they've been playing on the wrong field entirely. Kinsley grabs his keys. "Chen, we're going for a drive," he says, a grim determination in his voice. The pristine park and the glass house were a distraction. The real story, he suspects, is waiting for them in a place of dirt, hay, and secrets.
The drive to Blackwood Creek Stables takes them out of the clean, orderly grid of the city and into a landscape of rolling hills and weathered farmhouses. The air itself seems to change, growing heavier with the scent of damp earth and livestock. The stables are nestled in a valley, a sprawling complex of rustic but well-maintained barns and pristine white fences that cut across fields of green. It's a world away from the cold, sterile modernity of Julian Croft's city life. It's hard to picture the quiet, awkward financial analyst in a place like this. They're met by the owner, a woman named Isabella Rossi. She's in her late 50s, with a face weathered by the sun and a gaze that's direct and unflinching. She carries herself with the quiet authority of someone who works with 1,000-pound animals for a living. When Kinsley shows her his badge and asks about Julian Croft, her expression doesn't change. "Julian," she says, her voice raspy. "He kept his horse here, a beautiful thoroughbred named Oberon. He came out most weekends. Quiet man. Kept to himself. Mostly. We found a piece of a saddle at a crime scene," Chen says, showing her a picture of the leather fragment. "We believe it might be his." Isabella squints at the photo. "Could be. He had a custom saddle. An Armitage. Cost more than my truck." She leads them towards one of the barns, the air inside thick with the smells of hay and leather. She stops in front of a stall. Inside, a magnificent black horse snorts, stamping a hoof impatiently. "This is Oberon." She gestures to the tack room at the end of the aisle. His gear is in there. Or it should be. The tack room is a library of leather and polished metal. Each horse has its own station, its saddle resting on a stand like a piece of sculpture. Julian Croft's station is conspicuously empty. The stand is bare. His bridle is missing. The only thing left is a grooming kit, its brushes neatly arranged. The first twist hits them with the force of a physical blow. The saddle isn't just a clue. It's the entire reason the killer came back for the body. The fragment found in the park wasn't torn off during a struggle. It was likely left behind by mistake when the killer exhumed Croft to retrieve the rest of the saddle. An item so expensive and so unique, it would be a flashing red light pointing directly to this stable and to Croft himself. The killer didn't move the body to frame Finch. They moved the body to get their hands on a piece of evidence they couldn't afford to leave behind. Kinsley feels a cold certainty that the original burial site is somewhere on this property. They get a warrant and bring in a search team, including Officer Miller and Zeus, the K9 who started it all. The property is massive, over 300 acres of pasture and woodland, bordering one of the old, disused granite quarries the geologist had identified. It's a daunting task. As the search team gets to work, Kinsley and Chen continue talking to Isabella and the stable hands. They learned that Julian Croft wasn't just a weekend rider. He was part of a small, elite group at the stables that practiced a highly specialized and expensive equestrian discipline. And in that group was another rider, a man named Elias Vance. Vance, they learned, was a former veterinarian who'd lost his license, a real documented legal event. A state veterinary board had revoked his credentials for illegally selling controlled animal tranquilizers. He now worked as a freelance equine consultant, a vague title that seemed to mostly involve giving unsolicited advice. They also learned an unusual detail. Vance and Croft were not friends. In fact, they were bitter rivals. According to a stable hand, they constantly clashed over everything from riding techniques to the proper conditioning for their horses. Their rivalry culminated a few months ago, just before Croft disappeared, during a small informal competition. Croft's horse, Oberon, had outperformed Vance's, and Vance had been furious, accusing Croft of cheating. The argument had allegedly become heated, with Vance making a veiled threat. The search for the primary gravesite continues for hours under the hot sun. Zeus works tirelessly, crisscrossing the vast fields. Finally, near the edge of the property that borders the old unused granite quarry, the dog gives his alert. The signal is just as intense, just as certain as it was in the park. The spot is unremarkable, a patch of overgrown weeds near a crumbling stone wall. The forensic team moves in, and this time they find what they're looking for: a shallow, crudely dug grave. It's empty now, but the signs of a recent exhumation are obvious. And in the disturbed soil, they find a small glinting object: a spent .22 caliber shell casing. A small caliber, often used for euthanizing animals, the kind of weapon a disgraced veterinarian might own. The theory solidifies. Vance and Croft have their final fatal argument. Vance, a man with a history of mishandling controlled substances and a short temper, kills Croft. He buries him on the stable's property, taking the expensive custom saddle as a trophy or to sell. But then weeks later, news breaks about the discovery of remains in Northgate Park. Vance panics. He knows the investigation will eventually identify Croft. He knows that a custom-made saddle worth over $10,000 is a powerful link back to him. He can't risk it being found. So he goes back to the grave, digs up the body to retrieve the saddle, and in his haste leaves a small piece behind. Then he needs a place to redump the remains, a place that will throw the cops off his trail. What better place than a high-profile location associated with one of Croft's other wealthy connections, Alistair Finch? It's a desperate, brilliant act of misdirection. As Kinsley is processing this, Chen gets a hit on Elias Vance's current address. He doesn't live in a fancy house. He lives in a rundown trailer on a rented plot of land a few miles from the stables. They race to the location, a sense of an imminent conclusion propelling them forward. They pull up to the trailer. The front door is slightly ajar. Kinsley pushes it open. The inside of the trailer is a mess, cluttered, dirty, and reeking of stale whiskey. And sitting in the middle of the small living room, cleaned and polished and gleaming in the dim light, is Julian Croft's custom Armitage saddle. The second, chilling twist. It's not just evidence, it's a shrine. But Elias Vance is nowhere to be found. On the table next to the saddle is a handwritten note. It's not a confession.
It's a list of names. Julian Croft's name is at the top, and it's been violently crossed out. Below it are 3 other names. The last name on the list makes Kinsley's radio nearly fall out of his hand. It's Isabella Rossi, the owner of the stables.
The list of names on that table changes everything. It's not a confession, it's a hit list. And Isabella Rossi, the calm, knowledgeable stable owner who just helped them pinpoint the primary burial site, is on it. Kinsley immediately radios for a patrol unit to get back to Blackwood Creek Stables and ensure she's safe. The minutes stretch into an eternity as they wait for confirmation. The response comes back, crackling with static and tension. Isabella is fine. She's in her office, unharmed. A wave of relief washes over Kinsley, but it's quickly replaced by a chilling question. If Vance's list is real, why is Isabella still alive? They process the trailer, a grim treasure trove of evidence. They find a .22 caliber rifle hidden under a loose floorboard. It'll almost certainly be a match for the casing found at the gravesite. They find veterinary-grade tranquilizers, the very same kind that got Vance's license revoked. This is the smoking gun, a clear link between the suspect, the weapon, and the means to subdue a victim. But the man himself is gone. An APB is issued for Elias Vance. He's now a fugitive, a confirmed killer on the run. Back at the station, the atmosphere is electric. They've unraveled a secret life, found a second crime scene, and identified their killer. It's a textbook case of painstaking detective work. But the list still bothers Kinsley. Why those 3 names? Why was Croft's name crossed out but not the others? It feels like a performance, something left for them to find. It's too neat. As they wait for any news on Vance's whereabouts, Chen does a deep dive on the other 2 names on the list. They're both men, former clients of Blackwood Creek Stables, just like Croft. Both had left the stables within the last year after public acrimonious disputes with Elias Vance. The pattern is undeniable. Vance was a man who nursed grudges, a ticking bomb of resentment. It seems clear that Croft was just the first person on his list that he'd finally managed to get to. Then comes the call that turns the entire case on its head for the final, sharpest time. It's from the front desk. A woman is here. She's asking to speak with the lead detective on the Julian Croft case. She says she has information. She says her name is Isabella Rossi. Kinsley and Chen meet her in an interview room. She's not the same calm, rugged woman they met at the stables. Her composure is gone, replaced by a raw, trembling fear. She sits at the table, wringing her hands. "He's going to kill me," she whispers. "Elias, I know he is. We have officers at your property. You're safe here. We just need you to tell us everything you know about him." She takes a deep, shuddering breath. "It wasn't just about a competition," she said, her voice barely audible. "It was about me." She explains that both Vance and Croft were infatuated with her. They were rivals not just in the writing ring, but for her affection. Croft was quiet and generous, constantly showering the stables with gifts and funding improvements. Vance was possessive and volatile, his jealousy curdling into obsession. It was a toxic love triangle she wanted no part of. This is the first deeply personal twist. The motive wasn't just rivalry, it was a dark, unrequited obsession. She recounts the day Croft disappeared. He had confronted Vance, telling him to leave Isabella alone. The argument escalated. She saw them heading towards the woods near the quarry. She heard a single, sharp crack, like a branch snapping. She was terrified. She waited, and only Vance came back. He told her Croft had just stormed off, but she knew. She knew he was lying. "Why didn't you call us?" Chen asked, his voice gentle but firm. Tears streamed down her face. "Because he threatened me. He said if I ever told anyone, he would do to me what he did to Julian, and he would burn down my stables. My horses, my whole life is there. So I stayed quiet. I was a coward." It's a powerful, sympathetic story, a woman trapped by a monster. But Kinsley's cop sense is screaming. Something is wrong. He's seen fear before, and this feels rehearsed. The details are too clean, the narrative too perfect. It's the story of a perfect victim, and in Kinsley's experience, perfect stories are rarely true. He thinks about an odd, seemingly insignificant detail from the trailer: the saddle.
It was cleaned and polished. A man on the run, a supposed slob living in a filthy trailer, takes the time to meticulously polish a stolen saddle. It doesn't fit the profile of a killer in a panicked flight. It fits the profile of a horse person, someone with a deep, ingrained respect for the equipment. Someone like Isabella. This is where the case breaks on a point of law and procedure. Kinsley knows her statement is a voluntary confession to witnessing a crime, making her a material witness. But if he pushes her, he risks her lawyering up. He decides to take a gamble. He leans forward, his voice low. Isabella, we didn't just find the saddle in Vance's trailer. We found receipts. Receipts for high-grade leather polish, lanolin oil, and wax, purchased 2 days ago at the feed store right next to your stables. The clerk remembers the sale. He said he was surprised to see you buying supplies for a man you were supposedly terrified of. The color drains from Isabella's face. The lie, constructed so carefully, collapses in an instant. The second brutal twist. She wasn't a witness. She wasn't a victim. She was a participant. Her story comes tumbling out, the real one this time. She wasn't the object of their affection. She was the manipulator at the center of the web. She had been playing both men, milking Croft for his money to keep her struggling stables afloat, while using Vance's obsession and muscle to handle her dirty work. When Croft discovered her deception and threatened to expose her, she knew he had to be silenced. She didn't pull the trigger, but she ordered the hit. She convinced the volatile, love-struck Vance that Croft was a threat to them and their future together. He was the weapon, but she was the one who aimed it. The story about being a terrified witness was her insurance policy, a narrative she was ready to deploy the moment Vance was caught. She wasn't just an accomplice after the fact. She was the architect of the entire conspiracy.
Isabella Rossi's confession sends a shockwave through the investigation. The hunter has become the hunted. With her detailed statement, which paints Elias Vance as a volatile but devoted pawn, a warrant is issued for his arrest on charges of first-degree murder. The manhunt, however, is anticlimactic. Vance isn't hiding in the wilderness or making a desperate run for the border. He's found 2 days later in a cheap motel 2 counties over, patiently waiting. When the tactical team breaches the door, he offers no resistance. He simply looks up from the television, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, and asks, "Is Isabella with you?" The trial of Isabella Rossi and Elias Vance becomes the legal drama of the year. The prosecution lays out a clear, compelling narrative. A cold, calculating mastermind and her loyal, violent enforcer. They have Isabella's confession, the murder weapon linked to Vance, and the physical evidence from both the park and the stables. It seems like an open and shut case of murder and conspiracy. They expect to secure 2 first-degree murder convictions and close the book on Julian Croft. But Vance's court-appointed defense attorney has other plans. In a move that catches the prosecution completely off guard, the defense attorney doesn't argue that Vance didn't kill Croft. Instead, she argues that he is not fully culpable for his actions. She builds her case around the legal theory of coercive control, a concept typically applied in domestic abuse cases. This is a very real and evolving area of criminal law, where a defendant can argue their will was so overborne by a partner's psychological manipulation that their ability to form criminal intent was compromised. Vance's lawyer paints a portrait of him not as a killer, but as a victim, a lonely, unstable man who was preyed upon by a classic sociopath. She argues that Isabella groomed him, isolated him, and expertly manipulated his obsession until he saw Julian Croft not as a human being, but as a simple obstacle to his happiness. The first stunning twist isn't about evidence, it's about blame. The trial transforms from a whodunit into a referendum on who was the real monster. The key to the prosecution's case against Vance is Isabella's testimony. As part of a plea deal for a slightly lesser sentence, she takes the stand. She is composed, remorseful, and articulate. She details how she orchestrated the crime, feeding Vance's paranoia, pointing him at Croft like a loaded gun. She is, by her own admission, the architect.
It should be a slam dunk. But on cross-examination, Vance's attorney doesn't attack the core of her story. Instead, she focuses on a small, seemingly irrelevant detail from Isabella's initial confession. Isabella had claimed that Croft was blackmailing her over falsified financial records for the stables. It was a lie she had told to make her own role seem more desperate and sympathetic. Now, under oath, Vance's lawyer produces the stable's real financial records, impeccably kept, and proves she lied to the detectives. It's a masterful piece of legal maneuvering. The lie itself is minor, but its effect is catastrophic. It shatters Isabella's credibility. The jury no longer sees a remorseful co-conspirator. They see a pathological liar who will say anything to get a better deal. If she lied about that, what else is she lying about? Did she exaggerate Vance's instability? Did she minimize her own role in the final violent moments? The seed of doubt is planted. This is the second twist, a crack in the foundation of the prosecution's entire case, created by the star witness herself. The jury is now faced with an impossible question, one that legal scholars and psychologists still fiercely debate. Can one person's will truly be hijacked by another to the point of murder? After weeks of testimony, they return with a verdict that satisfies no one. They find Isabella Rossi guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. As the mastermind, she receives a sentence of life without parole. But the jury, swayed by the coercive control defense and Isabella's compromised testimony, finds Elias Vance guilty not of first-degree murder, but of the lesser charge of second-degree murder. The man who pulled the trigger receives a lighter sentence than the woman who never laid a hand on the victim. The verdict is a legal paradox, leaving a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. Justice was served, but it doesn't feel right. Months later, with the appeals process underway, Detective Kinsley gets a final supplementary report from the forensics lab. It's a housekeeping matter, tying up a loose end. It concerns evidence item number 1, the piece of scuffed leather that Officer Miller and Zeus first dug up in that perfect, peaceful park. The piece they all believe was from Julian Croft's custom saddle, the clue that led them to Blackwood Creek. The report states that after cross-referencing materials from his condo, they have definitively identified the leather. It wasn't from his saddle after all. It was a sample swatch from an antique settee Croft was having reupholstered. He kept it in his briefcase. The briefcase was buried with him, and this one small piece was torn off and left behind during the exhumation. It was a complete and utter coincidence. Their big break, the pivotal clue that cracked the entire case open, was nothing but a ghost. A phantom echo that, by sheer dumb luck, pointed them in the right direction. Kinsley puts down the report, the final ironic twist settling in his mind. They caught the killers, but the path that led them there was built on a foundation of pure chance, leaving the unnerving, unanswerable question of how many other cases are solved or remain unsolved because of a single meaningless accident. And so, the story of the peaceful park and its dark secret comes to a close. The scales of justice have been balanced, albeit in a way that feels unsteady, leaving us with the unsettling truth that the path to a conviction is often as messy and unpredictable as the crime itself. The motives we uncover, greed, jealousy, obsession, are as old as time, yet they find new and chilling ways to manifest in the quietest corners of our world, in pristine gardens and rustic stables. We are left with the echoes of the case: a disgraced mogul who inadvertently hosted a gravesite, a German shepherd who trusted his nose over the serene scenery, and a courtroom that had to weigh the guilt of the hand that held the gun against the mind that aimed it. It's a stark reminder that the most dangerous monsters are often the ones who can convince others to do their bidding, leaving them with clean hands and a dark soul. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. These stories are a glimpse into the shadows, but your presence here brings a little light. If you found yourself captivated by the twists and turns of this case, I'd be grateful if you would take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and perhaps share it with someone else who appreciates these deep dives into the dark. Every story is a puzzle, and your support is what allows me to keep finding the pieces. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on the verdict. Do you think justice was truly served for Elias Vance? I'll be back soon with another case, another set of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Until then, stay safe, be aware of the quiet places, and try to have a peaceful night.